And we are approaching the end. Only a few minutes to go. We want to wrap up this day where we heard a lot of interesting statements, a lot of provocative statements and inspiring statements. And there is one person who will make sense of it all and put it into perspective, Dr. Peter Forstmoser, Chairman of the Board of EFG Financial Products. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm of course aware of the fact that I'm now between you and the drinks. So I will keep it short. I think this would have been appropriate anyway because we had outstanding speakers with knowledge, with experience way beyond mine. And I think that mostly everybody in the audience is more knowledgeable with the topic of today than I am. I'm finally a lawyer. Well, but today's presentation, today's discussions circled around two words. The one was uncertainty. We definitely live in a world where, well, maybe even the future isn't anymore what it was, what it used to be. So things have become more unpredictable than ever. This applies in particular, certainly for the financial sector, and it applies in the context of investment decisions. So uncertainty was one of the key words, but while generally, and certainly for a lawyer, uncertainty is considered as a threat. The focus of today was quite the opposite. Uncertainty should be looked at, second keyword, as an opportunity. This was the topic of the roundtable. This was the common basis of the speeches. Well, I wrote that before, and when I was listening to Professor Sin's speech, I had a bit of a hard time to find convincing examples of his showing that we have lots of opportunities in these difficult, uncertain times. But I think at least Professor Sin showed that things are not hopeless, that we know what the right things are to be done, and that the right things will finally, in quite some time, lead to reasonable positive results. Well, Remy Bryan, looking at emerging and frontier markets, he definitely had an easier job to think positive, to point out the big opportunities ahead for investors that combine boldness with scrutiny and professional expertise. Professor Taleb, I think in his brilliant speech, he certainly showed why uncertainty can be a positive element. I will have to discuss this and that as a lawyer, you know, I'm not so fast as you are, but certainly I learned two things. First, that robust is not the opposite of fragile, and secondly, that I have to go back and read your new book and read Seneca. And I must say, as a former university professor, I highly appreciated your skepticism of raising the number of academics. I think we share this opinion. Finally, Professor Birchler, he looked at Switzerland. He was quite optimistic, maybe rightly so. I think ending the rescue operation for a large bank with a profit for the state and a profit for the national bank was quite a unique story. And I think the defense of Switzerland's industry against the too strong and ever-rising Swiss francs up to now was also quite a success story. So Definitely, we must not become complacent, but I think relatively speaking, Switzerland is in a good position, and I think we have good chances if we are doing the right things right. Well, let me add two short observations to the comments of Mr. Birchler. I make them as a lawyer. First, I think certainly Switzerland's success is, among others, a result of strong regulation, demanding requirements. I think Swiss finish, not finished, but finish, may be a key factor for Switzerland's achievements, also for Switzerland's future prosperity. So basically it's a strength, it's not a weakness. But I think we must not overdo it. Mr. Birchler has pointed out at the raising costs for small, medium banks. I think in many questions we have no choice than aligning Swiss law, Swiss regulatory environment to what the EU does, what everybody does. But I think we should quite carefully consider whether it always makes sense to put more icing on the cake. I mean, that's what we usually do. We look at what the others do, and then we put a little bit more on it. And this maybe is not always the wise thing to do. And secondly, I think we have a rising tendency to protect people from themselves. Maybe one example, Mr. Birchler has already pointed out at it, is this Say on Pay initiative. You know, it's an initiative. We will have a plebiscite on it next March. It demands, among others, that the general meeting of shareholders decide on the compensation of both the board of directors and the management board. It provides, also among others, for a 1-year term for board members. Well, maybe that makes sense for certain companies. Maybe, I mean, I somewhat doubt it with regard to deciding to have the compensation of the management board decided by the general meeting, but you can discuss that. But I think it's anyway inappropriate to introduce such rules as mandatory law. I think the companies, the shareholders, should be free to decide. They are mature enough. They don't need the guidance of a guardian, a public guardian in the person of the legislature. Maybe a positive example of the last months, we have a project for an ordinance of collective investment schemes. And there, in the it is said for the future, if this becomes the law, that an investor can declare himself, if he has a certain fortune, he can declare he is qualified, he is mature. By this, he loses some protection, but he gains freedom for his investment decisions. And this, I think, is the right direction to go. I think we have to assure by law, by regulations, transparency, so that investors can take informed decisions. Maybe we also need some warning signals. We have them already. I think the warning signals of the cigarette advertising have long spilled over already to the financial instruments market. But for the remainder, I think an investor should be free to determine his risk. He should be free to choose his risks because he knows that opportunities are the flip side of threats, that he has to take risks if he wants to grasp chances. So I think we must really remind that people are mature and they can look for themselves. Well, thanks again to the speakers. I think they all were brilliant. Thanks to Ellen Frauenknecht, the moderator, who also definitely was brilliant. We are still confused, but on a much higher level. And with this, we, I think, rich in enlightenment, we can now pass to the aperitif, which is just outside. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Right, that's it. Thank you all very much for being a part of the 6th EFG FP Day. And as was just said, drinks are waiting outside. Have one if you still have the time. And after that, have a safe journey back home. Thank you very much for being a part of this day.